Hello， 大家好，欢迎回到北美韭菜日记，我是九九。在上期视频里，咱们重点聊了大空头 Michael Burry 重仓做空特斯拉、ARK 以及做空美债的背后逻辑。一句话总结就是赌通货膨胀，国债收益率升高，然后这类现金流都反映在未来的科技成长股股价会进一步承压。我觉得它其实主要还是从宏观经济的角度出发的，并不是真的就和特斯拉、ARK 基金有什么个人恩怨了。因为如果通胀这个大前提成立的话，那他可能觉得这些股票会是最容易让他快速赚到钱的标的。毕竟特斯拉以及 ARK 基金现在已经可以算得上是科技成长股领域内的两面大旗了。我相信市场上做空 ARK 的人肯定是不止 Michael Burry 的，只是他的名气比较大，喜欢被媒体拿来说事。之后木头姐也在 Twitter 上对空头们进行了简单的回应，在我上期视频里也进行了总结。上周五，木头姐在 CNBC 里刚刚接受了20多分钟的采访，又正面回应了此事。我这边也是再充当一次翻译官的角色，把待翻译的原版视频分享给大家，中间也会穿插一些我自己的点评。不知道为什么这期视频也是并没有放在 CNBC 的官方 YouTube 频道里的，为了拿到素材，我也是特意购买了他们的会员服务，所以希望大家看在这1个月$30的份上，能给本期视频点赞。新观众们如果觉得有收获的话，也可以订阅一下这个频道。OK， 那么话不多说，一起来看采访。
Kathy, always good to have you. Thanks for the time.
Thank you for inviting me, Carl. Always happy to be here.
So let's talk about the short community at large. What is your message to them right now?
Well, you know what? When I see such negative sentiment out there, especially when it comes to valuation and longer time horizons, investment time horizons, I actually feel a little more comfortable. I like bad news and maybe news that's not the discounting is worse now than the news actually will be. I actually feel better in that kind of environment for our strategies. I don't think we're in a bubble, which is what I think many bears think we are. In a bubble, and I remember the late 90s. Our strategy would have been cheered on, rah, 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 go get them, right? And you remember the leapfrogging of analysts making estimates, one higher than the other, price targets one higher than the other. We have nothing like that right now. In fact, you see a lot of IPOs or SPACs coming out and falling to earth. We couldn't be further away from a bubble.
看到这里也是替我们的木头姐捏了把汗，真的是太敢说了。我自己作为一个只有10万粉的小财经博主，有时候发表观点的时候，还是会下意识的想一下后果，讲话有时候也会稍显圆滑，给自己留一些余地，以免讲错了日后被啪啪打脸。但是木头姐作为管理着几百亿资金的明星管理人，依然敢在美股高位的时候放话说我们离泡沫还远着呢。我个人炒股生涯里虽然是没有经历过美股的大熊市，但是我喜欢听一听经历过崩盘的前辈们，试图感受一下当时的市场情绪。很多经历过互联网泡沫的基金经理都在说，现在的市场让他们看到了当年的影子。投资人时刻提醒自己提防泡沫，这个肯定不会犯大错。但是有时候我也会想，如果是因为20年前吃过的亏，然后形成了惯性思维，过分保守的话，是不是同样也会让咱们错失很多优秀的投资机会？毕竟过去10年涨势最好的就是这些曾经的泡沫股。最近又读了 Peter Thiel 的从零到一，他也是和马斯克齐名的硅谷创业天才。书中有一章的名字叫做 Party Like It's 1999， 像互联网泡沫时期一样狂欢吧。里边有一段是这样说的，如果你可以发现大众们愿意相信的假象，那你就也能发现隐藏在假象背后有争议的真相。互联网泡沫之前，投资人的共识就是公司存在的意义就是为了赚钱而不是赔钱。但是到了90年代末期的时候，这个共识被打破了，大家更愿意相信亏钱卖梦想的公司，近期的盈利能力反而变得不再那么重要了。但是当互联网泡沫破裂之后，新的群体共识又被建立了起来，而且所有人在回顾上一段历史的时候会称之前的共识为泡沫。Peter Thiel 也正是凭借着这种逆向思维能力，才能在一级市场里押中了一个又一个伟大的科技公司。 Facebook 和 SpaceX 他都是最早期的一批投资人。不过从零到一这本书是在2014年时候发表的，和现在相比，时间空间也都发生了很大的改变。想要辨别什么才是群体共识，什么才是逆向思维，并非易事。风险偏好高、重仓科技成长股的投资人说没有泡沫，稳健型价值投资者不用太在乎市场有没有泡沫，手持大把现金等抄底或者是做空市场投资人觉得泡沫已经近在眼前了。到底哪个才是所谓的真相，交给你自己去判断。大家也可以在评论区里发表一下自己的看法。OK， 继续来看采访。
We couldn't be further away from a bubble. And the reason for that is the innovation around which we have centered our research these 5 platforms, DNA sequencing, robotics, energy storage, artificial intelligence, and blockchain technology, are barely off the ground. The seeds for all of these platforms were planted in the 20 years that ended in the tech and telecom bust. And ended in tears. And there's a lot of muscle memory around that. But that's not what's going on right now. The seeds planted back then are beginning to flourish now. And it's just beginning with 5 platforms involving 14 different technologies, all of which are about to experience S-curves and feed one another's S-curves. I don't think the market's ready for this. That's what I meant. We've dedicated our research and investing to innovation because we think we've never been at a more provocative time for innovation in history.
And I do want to get to how some of those forces are playing out on your macro thesis, which you've talked about a lot in recent months. But as far as the shorts go, in terms of how they have their eyes set on ARK specifically, is it just, do you think, is it general macro bearishness, or does it have something more to do with your ability to analyze all these companies that you're now in and stay on top of that game?
I actually think it's more of a macro call. When I read the bearish analyses, they seem to be centered on inflation and interest rates going higher, which will kill valuations. And if anything, as you mentioned, Carl, we're focused on the deflationary forces that are building up in the economy. I think that's going to be the shocker out there, that deflation is the greater risk now, not inflation. And not all deflation is bad. There's really good deflation associated with these technologically enabled platforms. They follow learning curves, which are characterized by declining costs and prices, and enables more and more sectors to have access to these powerful new technologies. So that's good deflation. The bad deflation is going to be associated with companies who paid too much attention to short-term oriented shareholders who wanted their profits now, wanted their dividends now, and did not want companies to sacrifice short-term profitability in order to capitalize on some of these massive trends that we see building. They are going to be stuck with obsolete products, and yet in the meantime, they've leveraged up their balance sheets to buy back sales and satisfy short-term oriented shareholders. How are they going to service that debt? They're going to have to cut prices of these products and services that are not going to be as popular in the future as they have been in the past. And then the third source of deflation, which is really starting to come through now in a noticeable way, started in mid-May, when lumber prices broke. We're seeing commodity price deflation. We've gone from, lumber prices have been cut to 1/3, less than 1/3 of their peak, 1711 to 500 right now. You've got copper down roughly 15%, 15 to 20%. You now have oil down nearly 15 to 20%. And I think the cream of the crop here, and the reason this may be happening and may accelerate to the downside, is the dollar is going up.
以上木头姐的这番言论又震惊到我了。之前他强调的只是说这3股通货紧缩的驱动力会极大程度上抵消掉美元增发、供应链混乱带来的通货膨胀的压力。最终呢，市场意识到通货膨胀并没有大家想象中那么严重的时候，科技成长股将再次得到市场的青睐。这次的观点更加激进了，直接就是说不仅没有恶性通胀，市场更要担心未来可能潜在的通货紧缩的压力了。这个问题我估计是有 99.99% 的投资人压根就没有考虑过的，可能也是因为看到最近大宗商品价格大幅回落之后，木头姐就更加相信自己之前的判断了。在几个月之前，她也是已经发表过这个观点了。我个人的判断是在接下来的半年之内，美股应该会上演大行情，主要故事线当然还是围绕通胀。如果经济数据显示通胀没有进一步恶化的话，那 Michael Burry 就可能身败名裂。反之，如果木头姐判断正确的话，那 ARK 基金将会迎来逆风翻盘，王者归来。怎么好像表达的都是一个意思，有点太偏心了哈。这段重来。 如果下半年经济数据显示通胀进一步恶化的话，那 Michael Burry 就时隔10年再次封神。反之，如果木头姐判断正确的话，那 ARK 基金将会迎来逆风翻盘，王者归来。当然了，这里还是奉劝各位风险承受能力不是很高的朋友们，咱们就老老实实的买标普或者是伯克希尔，然后吃瓜看戏就行了，不一定非要真刀真枪的参与进来哈。OK， 继续来看采访。
I know you've talked about commodity prices before, and I wonder if you're willing to mention any of the companies or industries that you're referring to, those that are perhaps sacrificing those long-term innovations that you're not a fan of.
在这里小小的吐槽一下，主持人需要多做一些功课了。ARK 在年初的时候就发布了一篇报告，叫 Bad Ideas Report， 里面已经非常详细的说明了他们最不看好的5个行业。感兴趣的朋友也可以在网上找来看看。
Well, I think that if when we look at the S&P 500, for example, we think that because of technology changes and importantly, that a lot of industries are in harm's way. Energy certainly is. Because of electric vehicles and the move towards autonomous electric. And you can throw in autos and and the auto supply chain. They're scrambling to try and get into this new world. It's going to be very difficult. Even when you think of retail, many investors, I'm sure, think, okay, well, we've seen the destruction there. We think it's just begun in a way because online retail sales have only hit 20% of total sales here in the United States. When a trend moves from 10 through 20%, it's usually moving into overdrive. So we think a much higher percentage of sales will be online. So even retail and any business that can be done online. Financial services, I would say digital wallets, DeFi, a big problem, a big challenge for financial services.
Right. And Kathy, a few moments ago, you talked about the innovative way that you guys at ARK structure your research. And I wonder, what does someone shorting ARK miss about your approach, the advantages or perhaps the differences of being an ETF versus, say, a hedge fund?
I don't think the wrapper matters that much. I think our research is the differentiator. And the way we've set up our research department is a differentiator. Unlike traditional asset management firms, our analysts do not follow sectors. They follow technologies, the 14 different technologies that I mentioned involved in these 5 major innovation platforms. So they are technology specialists, and they are generalists when it comes to sectors. So we have a very good idea based on our analysis of these technologies and Wright's Law. Wright's Law, we've centered our research around it. Wright's Law is a relative of Moore's Law. But Moore's Law is a function of time. Wright's Law is a function of units. And Wright's Law has worked better in the semiconductor industry recently than Moore's Law has.
快速的给还没听过莱特定律的朋友们介绍一下，这也是 ARK 投资创新型科技领域最重要的一项指标。最早是在1936年由航空工程师 Theodore Wright 提出，他发现当飞机生产规模每增加1倍的时候，成本便会以固定比例下降。ARK 把对莱特定律的观察应用在了电动车以及锂电池的发展上，也就是说，当电动车产量或者锂电池产量每增加1倍的时候，他们所需要的成本也会大幅降低，最终会形成产量越高，成本越低，成本降低则进一步有助于提高产量，这么一个正向循环。
So we think that's a very important gauge of how quickly these costs are going to decline over time. And we also pay a lot of attention to price elasticity of demand. At what point in this cost or price decline trajectory will new sectors open up to these new technologies? And so I think what we are able to see is our exponential growth trends that are not priced into the market. I'll give you the easiest example. Last year, EV sales were 2.2 million units around the world. We think based on the declining costs of battery pack systems, that electric vehicle prices will drop below gas-powered prices in a year or so. They're already lower from a total cost of ownership point of view. So we think that 2.2 million will be 40 million in 5 years, in 2025, not even 5 years. No one is forecasting that. So the starting point from the top down, using Wright's law, getting a sense of how quickly the costs associated with these technologies are falling, and how quickly, therefore, they will be taken up by more and more sectors and industries over time.
之后的采访里，是木头姐进一步谈了她对中概股的看法。大家应该也都知道，ARK是已经在几个月前就开始减仓中概股了，到今天基本上是已经彻底清仓了。主要逻辑就是他认为有一些行业公司在这种重大事件面前，基本面肯定也是发生了改变的。最近网上很流行的一个段子就是说，教育行业内的很多公司护城河依旧很深，只是长没了。说的也就是这个意思。这里再次提醒一下各位朋友，在抄底中概股的同时，可以好好审视一下这些公司的城到底还在不在了。如果判断不出来的话，那还是谨慎行事为好。从现在中概股走势来看的话，ARK果断割肉还是比较正确的。虽然很多公司也是在年初的时候才刚刚加入到自己的投资组合里。最近我看有很多早期抄了作业买了百度、贝壳这些股票的朋友们，在评论区里抱怨说，木头姐的5年投资区间根本就是个幌子，这还半年不到，怎么就割肉离场了？ARK基金这波操作到底是对是错？欢迎大家在评论区里发表一下自己的看法。这段视频采访的最后，主持人问了一些受国内政策影响比较严重的美国企业，比如苹果、耐克、特斯拉，这些公司主要供应链生产都是集中在中国。一起来听一下木头姐是怎么评价的。
I wonder, what do you say to those who wonder why, if there are these fraying elements of capital in and out of China, why some of our own companies for whom China is a tentpole, I'm thinking of Apple and Nike just as a couple of examples, why they don't seem to be reflecting that kind of fear?
Well, we don't know what the talk in the boardrooms is, and we also don't know what the dialogue between those companies and the government is. I know we can tell just by looking at what Tesla is doing in China that it is listening very closely to what the government is saying. Safety is paramount, and it is taking more precautions, I think, than might otherwise have been the case. And I think the other side of this is China wants to manufacture very high-end goods. It does not want to be considered the commoditizer of the world. And so I know that Tesla, Apple, Nike, they're all exporting from China, which says something about China's manufacturing prowess. He's saying we need to accelerate our movement up the stack in terms of quality and design when it comes to manufacturing. So I think they are serving the Chinese government's purpose in some way, and the labor costs still are much lower in China. So serving those companies well as well.
OK， 那么以上就是今天视频的全部内容了，希望对大家的投资之路或多或少都会起到一些帮助。如果有的话，走之前千万不要忘记留下一个宝贵的赞；没有的话，也欢迎订阅一下这个频道，我保证下期视频一定会让你有所收获。那本期视频就暂时先带来到这里了，我们下期视频再见，拜了个拜。